The country's housing backlog is growing, and at least 2.5 million families have been estimated to be in need of housing. Now, the United Nations estimates that the South African population will reach over 65 million people by the year 2030, and the CSIR forecasts that 75% of this growth will be in cities and large regional centers, which will impact on human settlements. Well, the chief executive of Communicare, that's Anthea Houston, joining us now to talk about solutions to the housing crisis. Ms. Houston, thank you very much for your time. Government, you will know, for the longest time, they always get accused of a housing backlog that they are unable to deal with adequately. Any solutions to this persistent problem?
I think there have been many solutions proposed from various quarters, but the ideas that I'd like to share is really that we need much more radical solutions than the ones that are being contemplated at the moment. Because of the kind of population growth that's anticipated, because we have such a young youth population in our country, we need actually to be ready for a real boom in the population in urban areas. And so what I'm talking about is that we look at the areas that have existing infrastructure and that we build much more denser settlements. When we redevelop, when we do new housing developments, we need to maximize how many households can live on those properties. And I'm also talking about building whole new cities. We still have vast tracts of land in our country where we can imagine and build new economic centers around which greater numbers of people can find places in which they can thrive, really, live and live quality lives. Because the solutions that we're working with at the moment are grossly insufficient for the current size of the problem and the anticipated growth in the problem in the short term.
All right. So let's talk more about the dense settlements that you are talking about. Structurally speaking, what are we looking at here?
So we have some areas in our country that are going into decline. Areas that perhaps used to be for manufacturing. In Cape Town, we have an area, for example, called Maitland, which was a very big manufacturing district, and where manufacturing has moved out of that district, and the area is just sort of slowly declining over a number of years. It's a perfect area in which we can do some high-density housing developments. Now, in South Africa, when we talk about high density, we think, a few stories, anything above 5 stories, and people start panicking already. But around the world, we're looking at quality, people building quality, high-density developments of multiple stories, 20 stories and higher, as long as we're providing enough space in the surrounding neighborhood for people to enjoy a quality of life. So ensuring there's enough urban gardens, there's access to places for people to enjoy, to have recreation, then building high density doesn't have to be a problem. Also, provided that it's around economic opportunities. So we can't just do these things on the outskirts of cities and then have people staying in what would then sort of equate to prison cells out on the outskirts. So it's got to be planned with some imagination and some forward thinking, where there are economic opportunities, there are schools, there are clinics, and there's access to transport for people to get to the amenities that they need.
Yeah.
And that's really what we're talking about in existing neighborhoods, higher density developments that allow people a quality of life and enough dignity in the quality of their housing. Because we have great numbers of people in our country living in very dense informal settlements with very little dignity, poor access to water, poor access to sanitation, and often no access to jobs.
And I wanted to explore that element of high-rise buildings, but I think you've explained it well enough that they need to be close to schools, basic amenities, but also importantly, places of work. Let's then talk about building new cities. That's not a new idea. In fact, it was mentioned by the President in one of his State of the Nation addresses. Talk to us about whether there is indeed appetite for this from where you sit watching government, or are these merely ideas?
You're quite right. These are not new ideas. I mean, all cities developed. The cities we know today have developed because they were once something imagined. People said, let's put a railway through there, and they built economic hubs around it, and this is how cities have developed over the ages. What we need to do is start saying we are the current generation of people on this planet Earth and in our country, and we have to ask what is our contribution to urban living in this time. If we look at what's happening at the moment, we're contributing sprawling informal settlements and a very inefficient use of land, the land that we have. So when we look at practice globally, there are a number of countries that are building new cities, building them around economic opportunity. For example, in Malaysia, they've built new cities around their tech industry so that tech industry could thrive, and there could be opportunities for people in the tech industry to live close to work and have a quality of life there. Also in other countries, in Africa, in Egypt, new cities are being built. And in Brazil, for example, new cities being built. So I think we need to think about why this is not a big part of our plan in South Africa. We do still have land. We have a population in need of housing, and we have a need to inject some energy into our local economy. And so I think there's an opportunity for us to build new cities. There have been proposals for new cities. You quite rightly mentioned that the President mentioned this. There are urban designers who have put forward ideas for new cities. These ideas don't seem to be getting traction. But I think we need to start a conversation about that, because the size of the problem is enormous. And we're not going to fix it by delivering, a couple of hundred housing units in a few urban centers around the country. And really, we have a massive social problem that if we don't start finding really creative and innovative and meaningful ways to meet it at scale, we're going to see more and more demise in the social fabric of our society, because we're not giving people the opportunity to really rise up and to achieve a level of economic well-being that they desire. And we have to start, as leaders in the country, we have to start being bold about the solutions we're putting on the table. I think the solutions we have now are poor solutions for the problem and the crisis that we're facing.
I'm going to lump two issues in one as a final question to you. And first, let's deal with what you say is land, that there is land still available, but the government will often tell you that that land is privately owned and they therefore need to make deals with those landowners in order for that land to be made available for housing opportunities. Link to that response then the element about people flocking to cities for obvious economic opportunities, but shouldn't government also be doing what the former administration attempted to do, which was the whole program of rural development, so that you arrest the influx into cities and people remain in rural parts, because there as well there are economic opportunities, or is that idea completely failing?
I think we're really in a time where we need both of those things. We need quality rural development and we need quality urban development. In recent times in the recent past, we've really had a lot of insight into how commercial agriculture is struggling in the country. But I think in South Africa, we still are producing a considerable amount of food. And we do need to be supporting commercial agriculture in a way that can that can fuel the economies in the rural parts of our country. There's, of course, other contributions, the economic contributions that could be coming from rural parts of the country. And we must invest there so that those who are keen and willing to enjoy life in the rural parts of our country can in fact stay there. At the moment, I think there's a very big push factor out of rural areas because it's very difficult for people to thrive there. At the same time, there's land. There's land in and around urban areas, and there's land in rural areas too. It's not true that all land is held in private lands. The state owns a tremendous amount of land. A lot of state-owned entities are holding land parcels that they're not utilizing. And the state actually needs to lead the way by releasing the land that it has for housing purposes and then invite its social partners, invite private landlords and private property owners to join it in tackling the housing crisis. At the same time, we do have a constitution that does allow the state, in fact, to expropriate land for certain purposes. That includes for housing purposes. And it allows it to do that in exchange for fair value. And it has done that on occasion, and it should be using that part of the constitution more often than it has been prepared to use it. Because I think there are a lot of private landlords that would give up their land holdings at fair value for the purpose of reducing the size of the social problems that we're facing in our country. It's very expensive to hold land. Rates and taxes are high, and people have to spend a huge amount of money on security to keep their land safe. So I think what we need is a much more aggressive land release program, and the state needs to really role model the behaviors it wants to see other landlords engaging in, if it's wanting to talk about the release of land.
Anthea Houston, let me thank you very much for your time and indeed contribution to this important discussion. Chief Executive of the organization called Communicare.